You know, you are someone who is always looking to understand the mechanics of the world.
Right.
You've got that drive as a learner to really peel back the layers of complex and deeply human experiences.
Even when those experiences are difficult to look at.
Exactly, even when they challenge your preconceived notions. And that is exactly what we are doing today, so welcome to this deep dive.
It's a heavy one today.
It is. Our mission for this session is to unpack a breathtakingly raw and intensely visceral concept album.
It's called Hollywood production.
Yes,
Yeah.
created by an artist named Ti-Fi. And it is this 11-track dark wave and cinematic trip-hop journey that just absolutely demands your full attention.
It really is a massive undertaking by the artist. I mean, it's far more than just a collection of songs.
Oh, absolutely.
What we're looking at is essentially a masterclass.
Mm.
She's using narrative structure and sonic architecture to process real-world events that most people can hardly even imagine, let
Uh-huh.
alone put to music.
So to guide us through this really intricate landscape, we've gathered a comprehensive stack of sources.
We've got the official album synopsis.
Right, and the liner notes, the complete lyrics for all 11 tracks. We also have a piece of the visual cover art.
And there's that crucial behind-the-scenes script, too.
Yes, the podcast script written by Ti-Fi herself for an audio project called Reclaiming You Writer's Room. Okay, let's unpack this. The central conceit of this entire album relies on a massive extended metaphor.
A completely corrupted Hollywood movie set.
Right. We are talking casting calls, directors, unscripted scenes, editing bays, the whole 9 yards. She uses this cinematic framework to document her harrowing descent into and her eventual triumphant exit from the sex work industry.
It's a brilliant framing device.
It really is. But before we get into the chronology of the tracks, why do you think she chose this specific, heavily stylized framing for such a raw personal experience?
Well, the writer's room script gives us a lot of insight into that choice, actually. Ti-Fi explicitly states that she chose this cinematic metaphor because sex work is, at its core, a form of performance art.
But a heavily stigmatized one.
Exactly. It operates in the shadows and is often entirely misunderstood by the general public.
Right.
So by framing her time in the industry as a Hollywood production, she translates a profoundly isolating experience into a universal language.
Because we all know movies.
Right. You might not understand the specific nuances of survival sex work, but you definitely understand the power dynamic between a demanding director and a vulnerable actor.
You understand what it means to be a prop on a set.
Yes, it builds this psychological bridge, making the reality of her environment accessible to those of us standing on the outside.
That makes a lot of sense. It gives the listener a familiar vocabulary for an unfamiliar world.
And she uses it chronologically.
She does. The album maps her journey from entry to exit. It opens with track 1, The Casting Call,
Which captures the absolute beginning of her time in the trade.
focusing heavily on the initial sacrifice of personal boundaries. She describes the intense dissociation required to survive when you are trading access to yourself just to pay the rent.
There's a lyric here that just stops you in your tracks.
Yeah, she talks about splitting myself down the middle, perfectly clean.
One half for the shadows, one for the scene.
It is a chillingly calm account of learning how to disappear in plain sight. The camera in this scene isn't capturing something glamorous. She describes it as a glowing red eye, demanding compliance, not empowerment.
And the production of the music itself reinforces that feeling.
Yeah,
You mentioned earlier that this is a dark wave and cinematic trip-hop album.
right.
So for those who might not be familiar with those genres, we're talking about moody, atmospheric electronic music. It relies on heavy, dragging beats, cold synthesizers, and an almost industrial bleakness.
It feels suffocating.
It does. And the production notes actually detail a fascinating choice here. The entire first half of this album is anchored by a very specific dragging tempo of 85 beats per minute.
Now, that specific number has a meaning, doesn't it? It's not just an arbitrary stylistic choice.
Not at all. That 85 BPM mimics the heavy, elevated physiological heartbeat of someone living in a constant state of hyperarousal and complex trauma. Throughout these early tracks, that heartbeat is suffocating. The instrumentation is built on industrial dissonance and claustrophobic sounds. It is designed to leave you, the listener, feeling like you have no room to breathe.
Perfectly mirroring her reality. You definitely feel that lack of air in track 1. She's breathing in the dust of the studio air, adapting to this toxic environment. And that slow poisoning bleeds right into track 2, Method Acting.
Where the Hollywood metaphor really starts to rock.
Yes, it's no longer just hitting a mark on the floor for a client. The boundaries between her real self and her character are completely blurring. Let's just pause on this one terrifying line. The safety word rots at the back of my throat.
What's fascinating here is how accurately this captures the psychological toll of long-term survival in an exploitative environment.
Because of the method acting concept.
Exactly. If we look at the concept of method acting in this context, it takes on a horrific new dimension. In cinema, method acting is when an actor refuses to break character, deeply internalizing the role.
But in her reality,
In Tai-Fi's reality, the submissive, compliant mask she wears for her clients begins to permanently fuse with her actual skin.
she talks about building a home in my own isolation and saying the yes when the body screams no.
That is the core of it. It is an exploration of identity theft within the industry. It's the dangerous, quiet trance of normalizing your own degradation simply to appease an audience of clients.
You method act the degradation for so long that you forget who you are when the cameras are off.
The character consumes the creator.
The lyric "I'm becoming the script" that the audience reads carries so much weight. But keeping our focus on the narrative arc, here's where it gets really interesting. And I use that word carefully, acknowledging the sheer gravity of what happens next.
Because the illusion of safety shatters.
Violently and permanently. In part 2, we reach track 3, the stolen reel. How does the metaphor shift when the nature of the threat changes so drastically?
This is the definitive turning point. The metaphor shifts from a harsh, toxic working environment to outright horror. The director is no longer a client participating in a transactional performance.
He becomes a predator.
He does.
The writer's room script confirms the agonizing reality behind this track. Tai-Fi explains that she was trafficked. She was turned into what she calls currency and traded for Tina.
Which is a street name for crystal meth.
Yes. The lyrics describe the fourth wall shattering and the camera going blind. She calls this an unwatchable scene. It's the violent hijacking of her autonomy.
An assault that the conscious mind desperately tries to overwrite.
But the body remembers. She was completely stripped of any remaining agency. She wasn't a cast member anymore. She was a stolen reel.
And that profound vulnerability sets the stage for track 4, Cut. This track details a separate event later down the timeline, but listening to them in sequence shows how compromised her safety had become.
Because it starts as a consensual booking.
Right, a negotiated consensual booking that rapidly devolves into a trap.
The desperation in this track is palpable. She is screaming cut, but the camera keeps rolling. She is revoking her consent, but she's physically trapped in this space.
And the metaphor she uses to describe how this predator forces her complicity is terrifying.
He hands her a pipe. She calls it a chemical lock on the studio doors to force her to stay on script.
If you listen closely to the background audio of Cut, the music and the lyrics descend into this intense sensory overload.
It's dizzying.
The room is spinning, the audio is fading into what she calls toxic cascades. The instrumentation becomes incredibly dissonant and chaotic until the track just abruptly fades to black.
As she loses consciousness, which hurls us into the agonizing physical reality of the aftermath in track 5, the evac, you have to imagine the stark contrast here. The cinematic illusion is completely gone.
She wakes up dumped in a downtown park.
As the sun is coming up, the dew is on the grass. She describes herself as a discarded prop, like a piece of shattered glass. It is the most unglamorous, freezing reality imaginable. There's no hero waiting in the wings.
No scripted rescue scene.
No.
I want you as a listener to try and put yourself in that physical space for a moment. Imagine the messy reality of survival here. Because the evac isn't a movie moment. It's desperate, it's cold, and it is endlessly complicated.
She dials the phone with shaking hands.
And calls her polyamorous partner. And who pulls up in the car to rescue her? His wife.
The lyric detailing that moment in the car is incredibly profound. Tai-Fi writes, she doesn't ask for a dialogue, she doesn't need the script, she just opens up the door. Why is that specific lack of dialogue so important in this moment?
Because, for the very first time in this entire narrative, Tai-Fi is seen not as a prop, not as a character, and certainly not as a commodity to be consumed.
Just as a human being.
A broken human being who desperately needs a safe place to land. The silence is a profound offering of grace. It's the exact moment she realizes the doors of that world need to close forever.
But getting out of the physical danger is only the first step.
Processing the damage is a completely different kind of war.
And we see that war begin in track 6, the review board. This is where Tai-Fi tries to take the catastrophic memory of the predator from the stolen reel to the authorities. She is seeking justice.
And there is a really crucial nuance here.
Yes. She makes a point to explicitly clarify in her liner notes that the police did not dismiss her for being a sex worker. In fact, she didn't even report that aspect of her life to them.
She states that law enforcement actually did everything they could.
Right. She expresses appreciation for them. But ultimately, the detective had to sit her down and tell her there was insufficient evidence to move forward with criminal charges.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see a textbook example of a devastating psychological phenomenon: internal gaslighting.
Because the brain hits a dead end.
Exactly. When a traumatized brain hits a dead end in the justice system, it cannot process the bureaucratic reality of insufficient evidence.
Why does the brain react that way? Why does it turn inward?
It's actually a twisted protective mechanism. The human brain craves control. If the system fails you, that means the world is chaotic, dangerous, and completely out of your control. That is terrifying.
So it creates a false sense of control.
Yes. The traumatized mind warps the phrase insufficient evidence into "you are the problem." It convinces you that if you are the problem, you can fix it. It whispers your trauma isn't real, or you brought this on yourself.
Wow.
This track explores how the failure of the system, despite good intentions, became the spark that ignited an inferno of internalized shame.
The system confirms every voice in my head. That's the lyric that anchors the track. And that internal pressure cooker leads directly into track 7, Empty Theater,
where things really unravel.
This track chronicles a massive months-long PTSD episode where Tai-Fi completely and publicly unravels. She describes breaking character in public. She loses her career, her professional network, her friends.
The metaphor she uses is incredibly vivid and chaotic.
The projector caught on fire in a crowded theater. And the audience, the cast and crew, her friends, they all flee from the stage. She's suspended on the wire, publicly burning down, watching the life she built dissolve in a terrifying flash.
The structure entirely collapses. The performance of pretending she was okay, of carrying that 85 BPM heartbeat, was simply no longer sustainable.
Which plunges her into the bleakest era of the timeline in track 8, Ghostlight.
This represents a massive gap in time.
Right, the hiatus.
Exactly. A 3-year-long hiatus. We really need to emphasize the weight of those 3 years. She is paralyzed by severe agoraphobia, deep depression, and the terrifying stillness of suddenly having no identity at all.
Entirely isolate.
And the metaphor of the ghost light is perfectly deployed here. In the theater world, a ghost light is a single bare bulb left burning on a stand in the middle of a pitch-black, empty stage.
Just to prevent people from accidentally falling into the orchestra pit.
Right when the theater's dark.
And she is standing in the dim glow of that single bulb. She's trapped in the void, floundering in the dark, completely stripped of her script, her clients, and even her abuse narrative.
She doesn't know who she is without the trauma anchoring her.
She sings, "The tape is too heavy, the scissors too sharp." She's just a ghost in the shadows playing a broken heart. It feels like the absolute bottom.
It is the bottom. It is the development hell of her own mind. But crucially, that stark emptiness is also the quiet before the reclamation. You cannot rebuild a set until the stage is completely cleared.
And that reclamation begins with such a powerful visual. To anchor this next section, the unglamorous work of healing, I want to bring up the official artwork for the album.
It's a striking image.
It's an image of a person's hands operating a Steenbeck flatbed film editor. Now, for anyone who hasn't seen one, a Steenbeck is this massive mechanical desk used by old-school film editors.
The spinning plates.
Yeah, it has multiple spinning plates where you physically thread strips of actual celluloid film through the machine to cut and splice scenes together. The text on the image reads, "Hollywood production by Tai-Fi."
That image perfectly encapsulates the narrative shift in track 9, Editing Room.
Yes. After 3 paralyzing years of isolation, she finally turns off the ghost light and steps into the editing room to begin exposure therapy.
And this isn't just a mental exercise.
No, she physically returns to the space of the trauma. She walks back into the downtown park at dawn where she was dumped years prior. She sings, "I'm taking back the set that he left me behind."
She is sitting in the director's chair with the power this time.
Physically splicing the tape, cutting out the toxic narratives, and untangling her own guilt from a predator's crime.
It's the painstaking, unglamorous work of genuine healing. She's picking up the scalpel and the glue. And what makes this album so compelling is that healing isn't presented as a magical overnight fix.
It's frame by frame.
It takes 1,000 days of deliberate work to rebuild a foundation. And we actually hear that healing in the sonic architecture of the album. This is where the music physically shifts.
Tell us about that shift. How does that 85 BPM heartbeat resolve?
Right as she crosses the threshold into the editing room, the music physically heals alongside her. The heavy, suffocating industrial sounds fall away. The sub-bass becomes warm and grounding.
The synthesizers actually begin to breathe and expand.
Yes, we transition from claustrophobic darkwave into this expansive cinematic alternative R&B. The music physically opens up the doors to let the light in, preparing her for the ultimate vulnerability, which we hear in track 10, improv.
I find improv so fascinating because the performance metaphor gets completely inverted here. Up until now, she's relied on a script to survive every single interaction.
But in improv, she has to learn how to exist in normal civilian relationships.
Without a transaction, there's no money changing hands, there are no stage directions to follow. She sings to her partner, "You touch my shoulder, and I don't have to freeze."
This track is all about unlearning the reflex to fawn and dissociate.
Right.
Fawning is that automatic trauma response where you entirely abandon your own boundaries just to keep a dangerous person calm. And dissociation is your brain leaving your body when fawning isn't enough.
Which was her primary survival tool in the sex trade.
Exactly. The terrifying beauty of a real intimate conversation is that there is no safety net. She says, "This isn't a scene, this isn't a show. I'm making it up as I go."
It is the profound act of dropping the act. Which brings us to the grand finale, the walk-off. Track 11, Exit Stage Left.
This is where Ti-Fi steps through the gates of the studio lot and refuses to ever look back.
The cameras are dismantled. She reclaims her main character energy, but not as a shiny performance for a client's gaze. This is entirely for herself. She fires the audience.
The production is permanently canceled. She is pulling the plug on the entire corrupted enterprise.
Her new stage directions are an absolute declaration of autonomy. She commands, cut the past, print the truth, fade to black on the stolen youth.
Such a powerful line.
She states that she is no longer splitting herself down the middle to survive. She is the writer, the star, and the head of the team.
It delivers an overwhelming sense of relief for the listener. You feel the weight of that 85 BPM heartbeat finally rest.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at this massive 11-track journey from the casting call to Exit Stage Left, what is the core takeaway for you, the listener, sitting with this incredibly heavy material?
Ultimately, this album is a masterclass in reclaiming agency. Ti-Fi shows us how we can use the power of narrative and metaphor not just to survive unimaginable trauma, but to completely rewrite our own ending.
She took the darkest chapters of her life and she flatly refused to let the predators or the broken justice system dictate the final cut.
The liner notes sum it up perfectly. This album's not a performance. It is a resignation letter, a burn contract, and a profound statement of absolute freedom.
She proved that the studio doors are never locked forever.
You are allowed to write your own ending.
It is so powerful to realize that you have the scalpel and the glue. You decide what stays in the final cut of your life, regardless of what scenes were forced upon you in the past.
And that actually raises an important question, something I want to leave you with today. If we build on this idea of learning improv in the civilian world, we have to acknowledge that we all walk around playing characters to some degree.
Oh, absolutely.
We all follow these unspoken scripts in our daily lives. How we act at work, how we perform in our relationships, the polite roles society expects us to fill.
Right.
But if you were to look really closely at the script you are currently performing right now, how much of it did you actually write? And what would happen if you decided to go entirely off script tomorrow?